call this January 25th, 2018 meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee to order. The time is 1:32. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Mr. Schutte.
Here.
Myself and Ms. Heil on the phone.
Cindy, are you on the phone?
We have quorum.
We do have a quorum.
All right. Craig, would you please do the public involvement announcement?
Yes, all AMATS meetings are open to the public. The public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. The committee will then be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
All right. Do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
A second. Thank you. Do we have any changes? Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Agenda is approved. We have before us the December 21st, 2017 for approval. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve, and I got a comment.
I'll second.
And I have two small changes that I noted on a sticky note, which is on my desk because I grabbed this one instead. But somewhere in here, and maybe it doesn't need to be changed, but it said, like David chastised me appropriately for not emailing, not getting things done on time, but I said I didn't have time to email people. In fact, I didn't have people, it says that I didn't have time, but in fact, I just didn't have their email. So I emailed Craig and said, share my information. So I don't want people to think, because it doesn't take any time to email people, I didn't have your email addresses. And then somewhere,
I will look for that kind of general idea, and we'll.
okay, and I have it at home, I could email it to you.
Okay.
If you guys don't mind just striking the parts that I didn't have time, that the point was made, that you didn't get it. And then there was something in here that is attributed to Chris Constant, which might be true, but if anyone ever read these things, they would be puzzled forever. And I wish I could, and I guess I'll skip that. I guess he said something was in quotes about John Weddleton calling someone crazy. Wouldn't necessarily say it. Might think it about people. But
If you just want to share those edits with us, we'll make sure.
So that was
we-
Chris's
Eliminate the
statement on what I might do, not something I necessarily.
Strike that.
Okay. Well, he's not here, I guess I could call him crazy.
Any objections to approving the minutes with the recommended changes?
I didn't really follow them, but I do not approve. I do not object, sir.
Hearing none, the December 21st minutes are approved. Moving on to agenda item 5A, continued draft 2021 to 2022, draft 2019 to 22, transportation improvement plan criteria. Craig, will you be presenting?
Yes, so these criteria were before you last month. Last month, we had them with the recommended set of criteria from the Technical Advisory Committee. As you remember, Mr. Weddleton offered some amendments. This policy committee asked that those amendments go back to the TAC for discussion and to make a recommendation at that. The Technical Advisory Committee did meet. They recommended that the criteria be approved as was originally presented to the TAC without Mr. Weddleton's amendments. I did just want to note, that is the one, yeah. I did reach out to the Federal Highways Administration to ask them if, in their opinion, the removal of two criteria would constitute a substantial change and thus should go out for additional public review, and they strongly believe that removing those criteria would be a substantial change and should go out for additional review. They did not think that the other parts of the amendment, which were some, changing some of the weighting and things of that nature, would be substantial enough to merit additional public review. But the removal would, they strongly suggested that.
Let the record show that Mr. Constant joined us at 1:36.
You want discussion on that, or?
Yes, any questions or comments from the committee?
You know, that was, correct, I mean, they recommended that, but there were two pieces to it. It was also that we would start fairly soon a process of looking at a revamp of the scoring criteria, so they kind of went hand in hand. Is that going to be a second part
Yeah,
of
so-
our discussion here?
The arrival of Mr. Constant threw me off. I apologize. I'm so happy to see him. The other portion of their discussion centered around the idea that should we start a process right now to look at the criteria to update those for some future tip, such that we don't delay the adoption of the 2019 to 2022 tip, so we don't have to worry about any project slipping and having a conformity lapse, but we take heed to the concerns and act on some update to these criteria in a more in-depth, larger manner without really having a time crunch in front of us. So the first step we took in that regard was to have a work session this week with the TAC to look at the current Unified Planning Work Program, which is our work program that dictates what staff is going to do, what staff time, which projects we're going to work on, which plans in the next 2 years. And we looked at that, and it was, I would say, again, a work session, so they couldn't vote on anything. But it appeared to be the consensus of the TAC that what they would like to have happen, what their recommendation would be, that we wait until after the adoption of the tip so it's approved by the September kind of timeframe, and then start kind of in-house with doing some research and having some public meetings and workshops or whatever we have to do to get as much public input as we can with these criteria. They didn't speak to the question of whether or not we would then take those criteria and start an adoption process of a new tip right away, but they wanted to definitely start the process kind of in the fall of working on these criteria in a more in-depth manner. Normally, when we're doing the updates to the tip, we go backwards from the date it's due, count the amount of time it has to take to go to the assembly, and the public review draft, and so on and so forth, and ranking and scoring, and you get to this date and say, okay, this is when we need to start working on it. So we're always in a time crunch because things always kind of conspire to slow us down. This would be in September. We would start on criteria without a real tight time crunch, and we could spend more time on them to hopefully get criteria that are acceptable to folks.
Mr. Schutte?
So as a matter of process, a follow-up question, it would be, are these two, would you envision those as two distinct actions before the board today? In other words, do we have one question which is adopt the tip criteria as recommended by the TAC, adopt the tip criteria as proposed by Crazy John Wilton, and as a separate action, we would make a recommendation that the evaluation criteria be reevaluated, I guess, starting in, did I hear the fall, in September?
So we definitely need one separate distinct action of adopting these
Just on
criteria,
adoption.
so we can continue apace with getting these creatures.
The two happen together, though. Can the action be a motion to adopt a given plan, and we will start the reevaluation process, or is it cleaner for us to separate those two issues?
It would seem, just personally, I would think it would be cleaner to keep them separate.
Okay, thank you.
Again, the TAC was in a work session and not a business meeting, so they couldn't take an action to either formally recommend that we start in the fall or pass a resolution saying they start in the fall, but it definitely was their sense, let's do that. And that is something that we could do with existing staff resources, start in the fall for that process. When we create next year's budget for the UPWP, we could add funding in there for a revamp of the criteria in a more in-depth manner.
Yeah, thank you. So when we talk about adopting new criteria or beginning the process to adopt new criteria in September, for what?
Well, again, the tip needs to be updated at least every 4 years. You could adopt it every single year, adopt a new tip every single year you wanted to. So there was a lot of discussion at the work session about what is the problem we're trying to correct with the existing criteria. And I will say that my sense of what they were talking about in the room was they weren't really able to put their finger on what the challenge was with the existing criteria and what they are not, what kind of projects people are thinking might do better with different criteria which aren't doing well with these ones. So they did not get the sense of urgency in adopting new criteria to start new projects right away. But the policy committee is the one who makes that decision. So if this policy committee wants to say, start your adoption of new criteria right now with the idea that 18 months from that date, you're going to adopt a 2020 to 2024 tip, that's just fine. You guys get to make that decision. And again, we have to adopt it or update it at least every 4 years, but it can be more often. We haven't done that before usually because of the amount of time it takes and the effort, but it's well within your purview if you decide those criteria
Well,
are
and
that far enough.
yeah, what I understood kind of as a consensus building tool or method was that we would work to adopt the criteria as proposed by the Technical Advisory Committee with the intent to begin the process of revising the criteria to tie them more closely to the local land use plan for an update of the TIP in a shorter term than at the next 4-year interval. And so I just want to be really clear that that's understood, even if we separate them, that the purpose of having this conversation is because there is a disconnection, and even though I would say it's really clear that the folks at the Technical Advisory Committee are unclear about how this would be different because we continue to have the same conversation. And so at some point, we'll figure out a way to communicate. And there was a few meetings that happened where we did not have quorums and we were separately discussing matters with the department. And I think we all are starting to move towards the same page. So,
Make that part of your motion.
yeah, I thought we had a motion.
Well, I'm okay splitting them up,
No.
if you want to do that. So I'm okay
Okay.
to approve the tip, then I think if we have a discussion on the scoring, I think there's a number of routes forward, one was presented, so. it'd be
Speak up,
good to have
please.
those- Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, I agreed that we should split them up. I think we should approve to discuss the criteria, and then have a separate issue, which is what's the process for developing the criteria? And the TAC presented one possible scenario, so there is some discussion that can go with that.
So then I'd be happy to move the.
Before we do the motion, we need to get public comment.
Okay.
If the committee's finished discussing before our motion.
Any comments from the public? Yes.
This is simply a matter of process.
Please state your name
Do
and
that.
remind that you have 3 minutes to speak on your action.
So I won't take that long. My name is Cheryl Richardson. It's a matter of process because I've begun to follow AMATS workings more closely, and I try to attend every meeting. I did attend the Technical Advisory Committee on January 11, but I didn't understand the outcome as clearly as been stated today, and I missed the work session. I'm not quite sure how. I don't remember seeing it posted. It may have been on my emails privately. I'm concerned about how people like me who care deeply about this process and how projects are selected in Anchorage, how transportation money is spent, can follow the process. And I believe that the Technical Advisory Committee minutes are not available until 1 week before their next meeting. So we don't have any action items in writing that we can rely on. And I think that that would be reasonable to change the process and allow action items to be articulated 1 week
All right.
after
Thanks.
these meetings.
Can you speak up 1 second, say something?
Now, as I think about that, I understand that minutes have to be approved, but I feel like we are in the dark until somebody comes out in the next meeting and explains what happened. Because I was surprised about what happened at the last TAC, and I still don't have minutes to rely on. It's a jumble.
You know, if I might, I think that, and I don't know how quickly the audio is put up on the website, but I think before there is a minutes, which definitely takes the next meeting and adoption approval that this is accurate record of what I said, that those audio records are in fact the tool that are available to the public and myself. I have to go back and listen. So I think that, I don't know how quickly those become available, but
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
the audio record of these
Is
meetings.
it on?
No, when is it available to the public?
Through the chair, most likely the next day by 1 o'clock.
What about the technical advisory committee?
Same thing.
Same, okay. So,
Thank you. I
Yeah.
would very much appreciate that, and I'll
Yeah.
work on that.
Any other comments from the public? All right.
Mr. Chair, I think that Ms. Heil is on the line now, or if we can, are you there now, Cindy? You heard her over there?
Put it on speakers.
Okay.
Isn't that over here?
Maybe not, who knows?
It should read.
You still there?
And just for a point of information, the work session was posted a week and a half in advance of the work session. It's actually still posted right now. I haven't removed it yet.
Where was it posted? Because I looked.
Right on the front page of AMATS, right underneath where the agenda for this policy committee meeting is.
Okay, I looked in this thing.
Yeah, it's right up there. Sorry.
She's
Cindy,
on
you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, all right.
Doesn't take much.
Let the record show that we have Ms. Heil on the phone. At 1:48.
So just a point of order. So Cindy, are you aware where we are in the agenda?
No, I could not hear anything until just a few seconds ago.
Okay. Do you want to recap then?
Sure. So Cindy, we have approved the agenda, we've approved the minutes from the December 21st, and we're currently having discussion on agenda item 5A, which is the continued draft 2019 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Plan. We have a recommendation from the TAC to send back to the Policy Committee for approval of the original TAC's approval of the criteria with no changes, and we're currently having that discussion.
I think we're ready for a
If you
motion.
don't mind my asking who's over there?
Mr. Welleton, Mr. Constant, Mr. Schutte, and I'm Mr. Van Hove, filling in for Regional Director, Mr. Kemp.
Thank you.
So I move to accept the tax recommendation on the tip scores criteria.
Second.
Are there any objections?
So I would just,
Discussion first.
yeah, discussion. Mine would be that, just to reiterate, I'm confident voting to support this based, predicated on the idea that we're moving forward with a review of the criteria for an expedited next review of the tip.
Maybe not the next motion.
Yeah, so I just want it on the record, when someone comes in and snips this part, that's why I support this.
Weddleton says the same.
Crazy job.
Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Can you ask Cindy? Did she
Sorry.
hear? Did she hear?
Cindy,
Yes.
So now regarding the timing and method for doing the new scoring, is that part of 5A? I took it as that because that was part of the TAC recommendation from December 11th.
I think you should take it up there.
Yeah, so it fits in 5A because it's not a new thing. Okay.
According to the memo.
yes,
What's
nothing
that?
Not according to the memo, I mean, you're absolutely right. The TAC, since that's the action item that we're on, the TAC's memo, the recommendation to do that, I think, is our clearance or whatever, our authority to take up that matter now. And so we've taken care of the first of a two-part business item, and now we're looking forward to that second part. I think Chris Constant is working on an amendment in his head right now.
Yeah, the TAC, when they met, they simply talked about whether to accept your amendments or to go with the original recommendation. That's what they took up in the actual business meeting. When they went to the work session is when they talked about, should we start it right away? Should we start looking at the new ones in September after we adopt these? But they couldn't take an action then, and as opposed to waiting another month to have them meet in a meeting or whenever they can get another quorum to have a meeting, they just kind of left it up to you folks to direct staff when you want us to take up that effort.
So on the 11th, though, it was kind of a package deal. They were going to recommend that, I mean, did they recommend that we accept the criteria as they were and we would start?
Well, if I remember on the 11th, they couldn't because it was just an approval of changes. There was discussion, but it was separate as well,
So are we adding a new agenda item here to make it all?
as a new action item.
I think it fits under this.
Right.
Same
It does, okay.
criteria, so.
I think we agreed that.
Well, I had a few questions. I mean, I could make a motion on something, but a couple of questions. And one, the TAC has recommended that just kind of fit it into your normal cycle. After the tip's done, you would have some staff time and you could start working on those criteria. I wonder if an alternative could be we do it sooner. And one way or another is change your work plan. Your current work plan is another thing. And I think that was discussed at the TAC, take some project off and replace it with working on the new criteria, so it's done sooner. An alternative, can we add as part of the tip, maybe the current tip, this is a project to revamp and then fund it and get some hire consultants. That's what we do often.
So the discussion at the work session was surrounding around, when does it make sense? The idea was look at the UPWP, look at the work program and see what we can move around. And the reality is, the projects that are in the work program right now, I think there's one that we're doing that's kind of a larger effort that's been being done in-house, and that's the Complete Streets policy, which is before you today as an informational item. And everything else that we have to do is a project that's under contract through a TORA, so we have, timeframes of when it's supposed to be done and finite amounts of time for when we can use that money. So there wasn't really a chance to move stuff around to designate a staff person to deal with this. The thinking was, when this particular tip, the 19 to 2022 tip, is adopted, my time gets freed up a bit more, and Aaron at DOT's time gets freed up a bit more, and we're the two that would be working on the tip anyway, and that would be, you'd have two of us ready to jump in and do that. This was the discussion at the work session. Do we have in-house staff to it? Do we try and scare up some other money to fund a one-year, addition to the transportation planning staff to have a senior or associate planner work on just this? Do we look for an intern, or do we do a contract that's based on monies in the tip? You can add a project in the tip, but this would be a major amendment, which is about a 6-month process. So, which is about September timeframe. That's kind of up to you folks. This amount of money in the tip is not a challenge to track down. This amount of money in the work program is a huge amount.
What do you think it would cost to hire a consultant to kind of outline a new scoring criteria that started with our comp plan and land use plan goals and focused on transportation?
Having never done really a contract like that particular one before, I'd certainly less than 100, probably 75 or so. I mean, a certain amount, when you do the federal program, you certainly have a chunk eaten up by overhead, so you want to take that into account. That's just a guess, a wag of 100.
Yeah.
Which is not really an option in the work program, but the tip, manageable.
So, in just my sense, I'd like to see it get started sooner, but I understand the constraints. So I think a motion would be that we start looking at a new scoring criteria that starts with our comprehensive plan goals in all its forms, no later than the approval of the TIP. Would you say the approval of the
September,
TIP?
yeah.
So later than September. So, because I'd like to search for other ways to do it sooner, but.
And just to follow up on that, John, I think that's, if that's rolled into a motion, that's a good motion. It gives direction to staff and lets the public know. I don't know if it needs to be part of the motion or not, but I would also recommend that at some point, this group be consulted on the scope. So when you're preparing in the fall to go out, to ensure that it meets your expectations with that motion?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I seconded. Are we in discussion?
I don't know there's a formal motion on the floor
I
yet.
call that a motion. I mean, that, maybe it was a wording, but yeah, I would make that motion that we start a process to revamp the scoring criteria, and that process should begin with our comprehensive plan goals, particularly the land use plan goals, and that process start no later than September. End of September? Any issue? September,
Either one's fine, I'm sure.
period.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Discussion? Any other discussion from the body?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I'm being very patient, sorry. Would the motion maker welcome an amendment that adds a requirement that any scope produced for this project comes back to this group for consideration?
That would be fine.
Okay.
I'd like to make that just the policy of the committee, that before anything starts, it comes to us,
Well, and that's
so we don't get it at the end.
Yeah, so I was actually in my comments going to speak to that briefly. John and I have been in discussion. I've been speaking with Mr. Kemp, and it dawned on me over the last week that, in fact, the policy committee and members of it, and probably several members of the technical advisory committee, have never been briefed on the land use plan. And when you have 2 members or 3 referencing the land use plan and its important values for this process, I realized, wait a minute, we're speaking to people who don't even know what we're talking about. So how is it possible that we could have a process where we are all speaking the same language? And then it also in that same conversation dawned on me that this body is often pinioned into a decision-making point where the only answer is yes, right? The only answer is yes. Otherwise, you get threatened with, you're going to end all of our transportation funding. You're going to break this project. The train's going to stop working if you don't say yes, right? And that's a difficult position to be put in. And I think that the answer to that is that, and maybe this has been done in the past, I'm pretty new here, that important policy questions before they go out to the technical advisory committee and then to the public start here. And that would be like a scope document for an initiative going forward. It could be like when we're looking at the update of the MTP
2016.
I hate to even think.
You want to write RFPs?
No,
That's what I'm hearing.
that we set out the values that we would like to see established from a policy perspective, and then the TAC and the public process moves forward to achieve, within the guidance of the federal rules and the state rules and the local policies, what's been established here as a goal. And then when it comes back to us, it'll be much easier to say in a documented fashion, look, this is what you told us to do, and here's how we did it. So don't tell us we didn't do what you asked us to do. That way you guys have cover from a bunch of people turning over saying, what do you mean? We did exactly what we were supposed to do. And so I think there's, in some way, a step missing in several of these processes that it would be wise to achieve.
I will say what we try to do and what we have done the last several times when we do an update to the MTP is we come in with a resolution that has to be approved by the policy committee that talks about what goals are we setting forth, what kind of socioeconomic parameters are we starting with so we're on the same page, and what kind of, what are the ground rules to start with. We've done that with the MTP the last several times that we've done it. Haven't done it with the TIP. It's, the TIP is supposed to be informed by the MTP, so doing it with the MTP is supposed to take care of that issue, but that's what we're trying to do to start so that you are in at the ground floor to just kind of give the sideboards.
Problem is you got these new guys coming in and coming out.
Don't know anything, don't know anything. I guarantee you, I recognize that. So that's, my only thing is that it is wise to have the scope come forward, and I am supportive of this.
Any comments from the public? Yes.
I'm very heartened by this discussion. I think it's important to people. I'm active in my community council these days again at South Addition, where we have 4 arterials coming through our boundaries. And we very much appreciate the policy committees paying attention to how our transportation system affects neighborhoods and can help build our neighborhoods to be stronger in the future. I think this is a big deal. Thank you.
just a point of order, maybe a moment late, but particularly because is that the tape over there? We should probably have speakers come up closer and then Cindy could hear.
Their
They're
microphones
almost
are
ceiling, yeah.
There. Well, I was calling in a few weeks ago to meetings, some that were here and the assembly meeting, and it was hard to get speakers. It's hard to hear what they were saying. So where are the speakers for the audience?
Well, that's a speaker and the microphones are smaller.
Or microphone.
I guess it depends on what they turn on.
And this is a backup, through the chair, this is a backup recorder, just in case.
Okay. I think in general it'd help though to probably be closer and Cindy could hear and assume it's on the tape.
Let the record reflect that that was Cheryl Richardson speaking on behalf of South Edition.
Is that fair?
Reporting on what I
Reporting.
attended at South Edition Council.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other
This is a
actions?
cliffhanger, we need a vote.
I'm sorry.
We need a vote on that.
Or at least an ask for objection.
Cindy's on the edge of her seat.
Yeah, yeah, you need to vote. I'll be waiting.
My script didn't include that stuff.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
All opposed?
I thought you did it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Craig, are there any other action items?
No other action items that I have.
All right, moving on. Agenda item 6A, the draft complete streets policy. Craig, will you be presenting?
Joni Wilmar, Senior Transportation Planner, will be sharing that with you.
Great. You guys leave me a stand or can I sit here?
Make sure you're heard.
Okay. I'll see, yeah.
And Cindy,
She just
Cindy, can you hear me?
Not very much. Move closer.
All right. I'm
you can sit right here.
Okay, so you have two handouts for the Complete Streets policy. And the first one is this one that has the listing of the people that were involved on the advisory committee for this policy as we drafted it. And it also lists the case studies that we used to draft the policy. So just to give you a little bit of background, we took this through the technical advisory committee and the policy committee as a resolution to start so that we could get approval to start working on the policy, and that was some time ago. And we got bogged down with some other projects, but we're finally able to bring it forward. We formed a committee to oversee the drafting of the policy. It included AMATS staff, people from MOA Traffic, Long Range Planning, MOA Transit, MOA, the Planning Director, Hal Hart, PM&E, Office of Economic and Community Development, Department of Health, and State Department of Health. And then we also had 3 members from Alaska DOT on our committee that helped us draft it as well. So we tried to do our best to vet it through all those agencies so that it could be something that was broadly accepted and usable by those agencies. That being said, it is an AMATS, it is intended to be an AMATS policy only. It's not intended to be a municipal or a DOT policy. Our hope is that the city will, if they like it, will bring it on as their own or make some changes to it to adopt it as their own, and then that DOT could do the same if they wanted to do that. But so that's kind of how we did it. That was over a series of several months. And then we initially looked at a bunch of different best complete streets policies from the National Complete Streets Coalition, and those included, well, actually Fairbanks wasn't on there, but that was one of the main ones that we looked at because Fairbanks has a complete streets policy, so we thought we'd start with that one as a basis and then build on that. We looked at City of Ashland, Madison, Wisconsin, which is another snow city, Ohio, Little Rock, Arkansas, South Bend, Indiana, and Park Forest, Illinois. And I believe we were looking at the 2016 best policies from around the country, and those were on that list. And then they all sort of had these basic components. So if you move over to the actual policy itself, They all had sort of these 9 basic components, which include the definition of complete streets, principles, the policy itself, how the policy is consistent, and along with other policies and guidelines. The scope of the policy, an important section, especially for other transportation agencies to look at, is exceptions. Where does it apply and not apply? Some design standards, context sensitivity, performance measures, and then finally implementation of the policy and reporting. Was there a question? No? Okay. Just feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So anyway, so we drafted the policy, and here it is. This is just an informational item this month, but we encourage the policy members to take a good look at it and provide us with any comments or recommendations that you have prior to us bringing it to you next month. And we're happy to incorporate those into the policy for you before you have it again. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I just wanted to point out one thing, and that is, and I highlighted it for myself at the technical advisory committee, and then I didn't, but there are some areas in here that reference the Green Roads program that DOT was embracing for a time, and I believe that program has changed in such a way that they're going to go ahead and do their own version of the Green Roads program. So those will be, those Green Road references will be removed and substituted with something else, and we're punting that back to Jim and Robert at DOT so they can give us some different language and be inserting that in there. So I think that was the only thing I was going to point out. But otherwise, if you have any questions or, yeah.
Thanks. What is the kind of timeline and steps to adoption of this policy in your mind?
So I think, so we are taking a few last comments from some folks over at DOT. Aaron's getting those for us. We're going to try to have those ready to go for the Technical Advisory Committee in February. And then once the Technical Advisory Committee approves that draft, we will put it out for a 30-day public review and give all the other agencies like Anchorage and all of our other AMATS committees a chance to provide comment and feedback. So that'll be a 30-day process. And then I believe it goes back to the Technical Advisory Committee for review and approval. So that would be April. What comes after March? April. And then if they approve that, then it'll come back to you in April.
Quick follow-up. Is there an active engagement process you're envisioning for working with those various committees other than just sending it out and saying, please comment?
That's a good question. As far as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, they've requested a presentation. So they have a March meeting anyways. So I'll be going to their group to talk about it. I haven't had any requests from other groups, but we're happy to present. If other groups want a special presentation, I can arrange something and go talk. So if you know of the communities or public knows of any communities that want some special presentations, I'm happy to go do that.
Thank you. What's your email?
It's Wilm, WILM, JC @muni.org. Yeah.
Mr. Wilson.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Just taking into account what we've been through. So now this has been informational. It's the first time the policy committee has been presented this information. If after review and thought, when would be the best time to put input into this so that it can be considered as you go along your process?
I was thinking originally, unless anyone has objections, that if you have comments to get them to me in the next month or so before it goes out for public review. That way we can get the comments into our draft or list of comments at least so it could go out for public review. But I'm assuming that also during that entire public review period would also be fine to submit comments as well. Unless anyone has other ideas on that.
No, it's good.
So one thing I observed just sitting here and looking at this committee is that it's an advisory committee, and there are probably one or two stakeholder groups in the community that are pretty much right up in this. This has been what they've been talking about for a decade or more, and they weren't part of this advisory committee process. And only people who are essentially, it looks like, are members of the technical advisory committee or some kind of adjunct of that, right? And so just from a philosophical perspective, it might be smart moving on other plans going forward. If you have projects that are really critical to key stakeholder groups, having a member of the public in that conversation, especially somebody who's appointed to a commission or who's doing work, might be helpful in ensuring in the earliest phases, because this is a pretty thoroughly developed product, that it has the voice of the public in it. So, and I'm not speaking against this, I haven't spent enough time to really contemplate it. I haven't shopped at the Fairview, which is where I'll take it first, because they're always about that. But I think that the first thing I noticed is it's an advisory committee without a member of the public on it. So.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I think originally we had decided to do that because historically there's been animosity between various groups, and to keep everything going ahead smoothly, our idea was, okay, we're just gonna have the agencies, transportation agencies, give them a chance to sit down at a table without being attacked by any one group, and just think about this as what they could see as a policy that would fit their needs going forward, and then open it up to the public groups. And then another reason, but I do agree with Mr. Constant's concern. I think another reason is just that we do have a lot of different groups that wanted to participate.
Right.
So logistics of getting everyone together, because I did get several requests to participate in this process, but yeah.
And it's going out for public comment right afterwards, and that'll be the full court rush to engage with communities and other groups and entities, but you gotta start somewhere.
Well, if I might, just as a member of the public formerly who sat through a number of these processes, the answers you often get back are, thank you for your input, move along. What was previously adopted is the item that matters, and we're moving forward with it. And so if we were really serious about having the voices of the people who are operating on be part of the development of these concepts, then I think the sooner we engage people, the better, right? And again, I'm not bashing the product. It actually looks pretty solid to me. It just seems like there's something missing there.
Yeah, for sure.
Mr. Wilton?
Yeah, a couple of comments. Cindy, thank you for asking for a deadline on comments. And I would say we did see a proposal, should we go forward with a complete streets process, and I think it was outlined what it would entail. And the policy committee saw it, and we approved going forward. So it was a case where we kind of had policy input at the beginning, and we see a result here. So that was very good, and I think it's worked well. And kind of following up a little bit on Chris's point is, you'd said, oh, people would get attacked. My experience is if there's people who are going to attack, you want them on the committee and you want them at the beginning. Let's deal with that right up front, because you're going to get attacked and you want to do it after all this work, and then you created a target. It's always found it's better to deal with that. Earlier is better. And then it also takes off the table, why didn't you tell me at the beginning? Because sometimes you'll have someone who agree with everything, but you didn't tell me at the beginning, no, I'm mad at you, I don't support it. And you want to avoid that, so don't be so bashful. You guys can handle it.
Oh, I'm not, yeah, no,
Invite those tough people.
nothing bashful.
But then, just specifically on this, a couple things that just come to mind. I may be addressing here, but one is, context sensitive. I want to make sure that includes, impact on businesses. So Spenard Road had, which is a great project, but it also had negative impact on businesses. I don't think overall, but when you lose parking at a business, that's a real problem. And that means sometimes you have to make compromises. You do your Sharrow instead of a bike lane or whatever it might be. But I would definitely want to have, and that's part of the context of some of these, and that should be in there, I think explicitly, impact on business. be aware of it, and if you're gonna impact them negatively, at least be open about it and say we're willing to impose that cost or accept it. Then, what does, you say this is an AMATS policy, but not a DOT or a municipal policy, so what does that mean? How is it used?
What it means is that, so for all of AMATS, so any project that gets AMATS funding to complete it, we are gonna try our best to make sure that it is serving all the users on the road. So any project that goes through AMATS or gets funded, so it's not a policy that applies to DOT, so if DOT is doing a project, their own project, that doesn't have anything to do with AMATS, it wouldn't apply to them at all. Or if the city has a project that doesn't have anything to do with AMATS or is funded through a different source, it wouldn't apply to that at all. So, does that make sense?
When AMATS passed the context-sensitive design policy in 2006, 2007, they passed it with a suggestion that both the municipality and the state should pass their own. And the municipality opted to create their own separate context-sensitive design policy, and DOT references the NEPA process that they utilize, which they suggested that's what they use to do context-sensitive design. So in this case, AMATS can pass a complete streets policy that, deals with projects that we are paying for, that we are wanting to utilize this thing. But the CIP, those bond projects, they may or may not follow this. It's kind of up to them, unless the municipality decides to adopt their own complete streets policy. Joni can probably tell you which states, or some of the states that have a complete streets policy, and that'd be great if the state of Alaska wants to do that, but right now what AMATS can govern is AMATS stuff. So it's our hope that it blossoms out. I mean, Fairbanks already has a complete streets policy. It'd be great if we could join suit, so.
Okay, so 2 follow-ups on that.
Oh, sorry, and just real quick, and so one other thing about that is that, so if there's an AMATS plan that's for a project that's funded through AMATS, and somebody doesn't want to comply with, what we're asking for in the policy, then it has to actually come to you as a committee, and you have to approve that they're not going to comply with it.
So a particular project.
There's a particular project, and they say, well, we don't want to provide access for pedestrians on this project because of the cost or whatever it may be, then this policy, once adopted, will mean that it'll funnel through our committees and come to you. And if you decide that, that's okay, then it can go ahead, but if not, then,
So to follow up, so one thing you would ask then, after this whole process is done, you've got one and this committee adopts it, then it's sort of ready to go for Chris to introduce it to the assembly for the municipality to adopt. Is that would be the process?
I don't know what the municipality's process will be, but I imagine.
No, to adopt it as municipal policy in that fashion.
But if we wanted, here we have a ready-made, complete streets policy.
I think it would actually, if I might go to planning and zoning for a contemplation, what would this do to our planning and systems? And so,
We could introduce it, feed it to the planning committee.
right, let them
Some.
kind of vet it and go through a process so that we ensure that it comports with all the various municipal building and roads and planning requirements, then could come to us. I don't think it would be that this would fit squarely onto the municipal requirements.
And I think you would want to do some heavy vetting through traffic and
Yeah, and
all
traffic and
that.
planning.
But that would be a process.
Yeah.
It's our hope that something or akin to this
It could
would
be
be
good
adopted
if it was,
eventually.
if it fit.
So then the separate, so with AMATS, so if we have this in place, is it then assumed that any project that would be funded by AMATS, the default is you follow this?
Yeah, and what we'd like to have happen, and this is what they do in Fairbanks, is the creation of a checklist. So for any project that's happening, there's a checklist that before the project is, I don't know what design or what % design they start at, I'd have to ask Donna, but before the project has even begun, you've got a group of certain stakeholders that are able to do a walk through that project and check off, okay, is this serving this, is this meeting this requirement, and then come up with a list of, this is our hope for this project, or we have some concerns with this, and so it would just have a checklist would sort of be the tool. Did that answer your question?
Well, I think so, we're
Around that
getting
way?
closer, because if we have the tip and we have projects on there, we have projects, they're not designed yet. I mean, they're just really, some of them just very conceptual, right?
Yeah.
So we have it on there. So maybe, and we approve it, maybe it becomes our number one project and it's going to be funded. And then it comes forward and then they say, but we don't think we can do some of the things in your complete streets. Does it get knocked down and it's not a priority anymore? Is one of the scoring criteria meets complete streets criteria, but we don't know yet because it's not designed. So where does it fit in?
Well, AMATS, the policy committee can decide the funding of any project that's in it. You know, we've had projects come through here and the design was not what the majority of the committee wanted, and they didn't fund the right-of-way phase, and it killed the project. So, you know, we typically say that AMATS is not a design entity, and we let the professional engineers do that sort of thing, but in that case, it was a very controversial project that, as you know, they decided, well, we don't want that to go forward that way, and the only thing they could do was kill the right-of-way phase, and that killed the project. So you always have that ability. Once projects are in the construction phase, though, it's going. So we're trying to catch it before that. Would be to catch it before that.
And that being said, I think one thing that we're really trying to hammer home with this policy is that each road, and we've heard this over and over again, trying to implement our bike and ped plans, but that each road or project be looked at as its own case, because there are many different types of streets that can be considered a complete street. They don't all have to have the bells and whistles of the bike lanes and the separated sidewalks and the lighting and everything. So if the project's making a good faith effort to provide safe passage for most user groups, you know, we're encouraging that each project be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So it's not like a silver bullet policy.
Very good, thank you.
I would say item number 6 is perhaps the cheapest variance in the whole municipal system.
Repeat.
Section 6, the exceptions, basically, that's a variance, like, you are allowed to vary from the requirement, right? And to do that at any of our departments is an incredible, expensive, burdensome process, and here it's literally make an appointment, get a hearing, and ask the question. And so I'm not speaking against that, I'm just noting that that's pretty amazing from a municipal perspective. It's an extraordinary gift.
It
Yeah.
also has to get 3 votes,
You're right.
so
Yeah.
there's your check and balance, I guess.
It's the same at any other body, but yeah, it's just amazing. Like, what does a variance cost at the planning department?
We can do it on the assembly though. We can do that.
Yeah, pretty rare. Anyhow, it's an interesting policy.
Thank you, Joni. Any other questions or comments from the committee for Joni? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Yes.
My name is Cheryl Richardson. I thank you very much for your discussion. And Christopher, thank you for thinking about the folks who are out there using the facilities and have been concerned about these issues for decades. I was just trying to apply, let me go back again. I think 30 days review of this is superficial, I hate to say that word, but what we need is an involvement by the people who've been working on this for years. I would expect a huge work session and discussion with the Bike Ped Committee at a minimum. These people have been involved. I'm not familiar with your arguments that you're discussing. I expect they are there, but I just haven't seen them. I tried to apply this language to bike ped conflicts we've had in South Addition over the last few years, decades, and it doesn't help. We had an access to the Chester Creek Trail. We wanted a curb cut. DOT said, no, thank you, wasn't allowed. Another time, DOT cut out a path that went straight down the L Street sidewalk to the Chester Creek, and they dropped it off their program, their design, their spending, because a neighbor complained about having people walking across their backyard right away. I'm saying that the real world needs more detail than is provided in this language. I read it quickly and I didn't find where this language would have helped resolve either of those situations. So thank you for getting this forward. It's a great effort, and thank you, Christopher, for trying to bring it down to the folks who've been dealing with the nitty-gritty all these years.
Any other comments from the public? Thank you. Moving to agenda item 6B, project update of 2040 MTP. Greg, will you be presenting?
Vivian Underwood will present that. She's managing that project right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Craig. As you all remember, we had our 3-day public charrette in November. We got a lot of public feedback, great feedback, and we've been in the process of synthesizing that. And we're preparing a survey that will go out on February 1st, a 30-day public review involvement opportunity. During that time, we'll be taking all the material that we got from the charrette also to the Citizens Advisory Committee, because there are people on the committee who really wanted to weigh in on that. Then we'll do a comment response summary. And by the way, the charrette summary is on the web right now. But we'll do a comment response summary and bring back to you and ask you all to please approve the ideas and the concepts for modeling. We don't want to waste any of our money doing computer modeling until we know that we have a go-ahead. That'll go out for another 30-day public review period to make sure we got that right. Then we'll come back to the AMATS committees and ask you to approve a final preferred alternative that we'll move forward with as we prepare the public review draft that will be out by the end of this year. So that's where we are. The survey, we hope, our intent is to try to help the public see where some trade-offs might be made for roads or transit or whatever between the two scenarios. We're trying very hard to make that clear and simple, easy to understand. It's harder to do than we thought, but that's our goal. And the survey will be accompanied by a document that hopefully people will read, but it will give you more information if people are interested after they take the short survey. We're limited by what we can provide in the survey. If anybody has any questions, I won't bore you with more.
Mr. Welton.
And how are you distributing the survey?
It will be, we'll have an email blast both from AMATS and from the project website. And so everybody on this body should get a notice about it going out.
And it's just, we get it, we post it to our Facebook and email it to our friends, and it's just to broadly distribute this thing.
Yes.
Right? Anyway.
Yes. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Is that relative to this item?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any comments from the public?
One question.
Yes.
Steve Johnson from Bike Anchorage, and I've just wondered when the synthesis was posted, because I've been looking for it fairly often, and I haven't found it, so I don't know if it's on the MTP 2040 website.
Yes, it's right on the main page. There's a link to it from the main page.
Okay, most of the things that I've been finding are summaries from much earlier in the year, and I'll look again.
Okay,
But
I just checked the website. It's there. But if you have any trouble, please let me know.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. The floor is now open for comments from the committee.
Yeah, thank you. Sir, in my conversations in the last kind of 10 days, as I mentioned earlier, dawned on me that the several members of the DOT staff and the AMATS and probably members of the TAC don't have a real grounding in the land use plan that passed the comprehensive plan. And so speaking with Mr. Kemp, he and I had a discussion, and he agreed that it would be a good idea at some point in the not too distant future to have a kind of a more in-depth conversation about the goals and vision of the 2040 land use plan, so that we can all start to have a conversation about the same items. And we've been in discussion about who some of the presenters might be, and I'll talk to you, Chris, about that as well. So, because we want to make sure it's done right by the right people and the right message gets across. So just wanted you to know that that conversation is probably going to come forward.
Mr. Wilton?
No, I think I've said enough.
You didn't talk about vote by mail.
Yours,
Just a reminder to everyone in the room, and especially our public members, that this is the first election where you have to vote by mail. Keep your eyes peeled for those ballots as they arrive in, I don't know, a month or a month and a half. So, that's it.
Ms. Heil?
I just want to say sorry I was late getting on the phone and appreciate everybody's patience.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Make one quick introduction. As you know, Ms. Brewer, Teresa Brewer, who was our freight mobility coordinator and transportation modeler, senior planner extraordinaire, moved to take a position as the MPO director in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So we were fortunate enough in filling the position to track down John Cecil, who is right here. You probably recognize him as one of the senior planners in the long-range planning section. He's got a lot of long-range planning background and some MPO experience from a previous life. So he has taken over those positions, and you'll probably see a lot more of him when it comes to those topics. But we're fortunate to have him on board with us.
Well,
Thank you.
all right, the floor is now open for comments from the public.
Nice cake.
Meeting's adjourned. Time is 2:33.
It is.